Welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Brath Wang. With tensions between China and the Philippines reaching an all-time high, we'll look at whether diplomacy could hurt or help disputes in the South China Sea. From talks between Chinese and Filipino representatives in Manila to Marcos Jr.'s withdrawing of U.S. intermediate-range missiles, we've also seen the Philippines and Japan formally sign a reciprocal access agreement, giving mutual access to troops deployments in each other's soil. We'll discuss exactly what Marcos Jr.'s intentions are. Joining us today are Liu Fu-kuo, National Chengchi University, Taiwan Center for Security Studies Director, Jed Rabena, University of the Philippines, Asian Center Professional Lecturer. A very warm welcome to both on the show.
Thank you. Yeah.
Although Manila hosted the China-Philippines Bilateral Consultation Mechanism, known as the BCM, the Philippine Department of Foreign Affairs released a statement shortly after to stress that significant differences remain. We've also seen President Marcos Jr. also announce the withdrawal of U.S. intermediate-range missile systems. Professor Liu, how do we read into this?
This bilateral consultation mechanism meeting ends with something quite positively. So after July 2nd, the meeting ends. 2 days later, the Philippine government announced something differently, more, as I consider, more relaxed and changing the course of tension in the South China Sea. But basically, the Philippines and China try to develop and also operationalize this maritime communication mechanism, which many media covered but has not been emphasized. With this intention, positive intention from Manila and Beijing, I do see something, this dialogue will be carried through. And they have also tentatively agreed next year, this bilateral consultation meeting will continue for the next round, which I consider a positive sign.
Professor Rabena, Professor Liu mentioned the positivity out of this in terms of continued talks, but coming from the Philippines, how do you see this in terms of substance?
Yeah, so it is very much also welcomed in the Philippines to show that the relations with China is not all hostile and that there remains room for constructive engagement. And of course, after these things happen, it's important to monitor whether or not there have been changes in terms of the behaviors on the ground or at sea. And so that is really what the Philippine side expects and would want to see from China.
It's great mentioning in terms of what happens on the ground. In addition to the Chinese Coast Guard cutting off a finger of a Philippine naval officer during a resupply mission, the Shandong, a Chinese aircraft carrier, made its first appearance around Philippine waters. Going back to you, Professor Rabena, as you mentioned that we still have to continue to take a look, even though this is very positive, you both mentioned. What does China see in terms of its actions at sea with continued provocations, despite having these consultations?
Yeah, I think China is trying to send a message that they can put pressure on the Philippines, but you see, Manila is somehow resisting this pressure by making use of various.
So is this a stick after the carrot approach, given talks would be seen as a carrot and sending the Shandong over would be seen as a stick?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. It means that perhaps Beijing is still not satisfied with the current state of play. And so it should be a combination for Manila as well to, at the same time, strengthen its defense and security posture, while also trying to continue and work things out with Beijing on the negotiating table.
Professor Liu, I wanted to talk a bit about how President Marcos Jr. withdrew the U.S. intermediate range missiles.
Right.
What does this mean for regional security, and what do you think is behind Marcos Jr.'s decision on this?
I think at this time, what I can tell is this ongoing controversial picture between the Philippines and China is very complicated. So as we discussed briefly, there would be some portion of the forces in different society supporting such a dialogue, but there of course are different radical voices. They do not want to dialogue further.
This is within the Philippines or within China?
Yeah, both sides. There are, of course, a hardline and also different, more moderate position. But basically, after the meeting between the two countries, 2 days later, the Philippine government announced they want to withdraw by the end of September. But of course, this is complicated. There is some important message in between Beijing and Manila. Manila currently consider it is a critically important and also critical timing because the strongest support from the United States, obviously President Biden is busy with his own upcoming election campaign. So in this particular time, nobody really wants to push further with this conflict happening. So I do think this consultation would be gradually leading to a certain dialogue, but it doesn't mean that both countries are satisfied with what they discuss further. But the important landmark, as I mentioned, I always look into positive side because I don't see both delegations will immediately reach the consensus for all the issue. But at least what I can see is this operationalize this joint mechanism, communication mechanism. They are also currently thinking to revise Joint Coast Guard Committee, which is all the more important. Currently, all the issues surrounding in the South China Sea would have to discuss by China and the Philippine Coast Guard.
And aggression is also
Yes.
within the Coast Guard.
Right.
Professor Rabena, given what Professor Liu mentioned in terms of how there's more dialogue and including the Coast Guard, and with President Marcos Jr. withdrawing these intermediate range missiles, do you see this as Chinese tactics actually being successful in getting its way?
Well, I think the withdrawal of the U.S. Intermediate range missile system, I think had served its purpose. It was used in the Philippines-U.S. Army-to-Army Salaknib exercises, and so it's been done. So perhaps it's now time to withdraw it. And second motive, perhaps by the U.S. or with the Philippines, is that it could be to test the waters and see what the reactions will be of the regional actors. And number three, perhaps it is to send a message that there is this tool as a form of a tool for political pressure. As to whether or not it works is debatable and remains to be seen. And so,
do you see it as this instance alone being a success on the Chinese side?
Well, they can claim that it was, to them, it was, but for the Philippine side, its purpose had been served already. And so other military forms of cooperation with the United States and even with Japan will continue going forward.
We'll also talk a bit about Japan going forward. And Professor Liu, I wanted to go back to what Professor Rabena talked about in terms of what regional actors are. Taiwan, of course, is a regional actor.
Right.
What does this mean for Taiwan?
Of course, our government, in the current government and also previous government, hope that the status quo and the peace will be prevail in the South China Sea. So basically, Taiwan's position is very clear. We were encouraged not to escalate all the tension and running into conflict. So, of course, we see this positive development note, but we also know we should not be too naive because Philippines and China do not have such a high consensus. They could agree upon moving forward with the existing mechanism to dialogue. At least they can meet each other, trying to shive away those conflicts. But this is a controversial and difficult issue for the Philippines and China. I do think it is a long way for two governments to discuss further. But of course, in the next few months, with this geopolitical transformation taking place, it will be gradually challenging, not just for other countries, but also for Taiwan. We are standing in the middle of South China Sea. We definitely need to pay more attention to what happened over there.
But as you said, with more peace, it actually makes it safer for Taiwan as well, given
Yes.
the dialogue and all. From a logistics standpoint, we've talked a bit about the U.S. intermediate range missiles. With that out of the Philippines, would that make Taiwan have less assurances?
I think basically deployment of a Typhoon missile is per se is critical and also controversial because it directly connects the South China issue with Taiwan security. So overall in the region, if these medium-range missiles continuously deployed in the Philippines, it will be also escalate the tension between China and the Philippines, China and the United States. So I may be taking different observation. I thought that if the Philippines can really withdraw this controversial missile, basically it send a positive note to Beijing. Hopefully Beijing will pay back later on with something more benign attitude to the
Could that
Philippines.
be to Taiwan as well, perhaps? Because ultimately, they're looking at how their relationship will turn with the U.S.
Right. But of course, currently the Taiwan Strait contingency or the South China Sea contingency all depends on the relations between the U.S. and China. So we are just hoping the U.S. and China will be moving into more positive front. Otherwise, the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea issue will be gradually connected with each other's, building or maybe swirling into tension, higher tension in the region. It will not be good for Taiwan.
In terms of how the U.S. sees this, I wanted to also turn to how the Philippines sees this. Professor Rabena, how is the Philippines reading what Professor Liu mentioned, that President Biden's busy in the U.S. with his election, and given more recent drama in terms of the elections, the U.S. domestic elections, is the Philippines making decisions on its own, thinking that the U.S. may want to not escalate tensions?
Well, yeah, actually, that is a possibility. And so right now in Manila, we have what we call an independent foreign policy. So that means basically either diversification of partners and allies. And so what Manila has done recently is basically to engage with different actors like Australia, Japan, India, European countries, among others. And so the most recent one being is this RAA, Reciprocal Access Agreement with Japan. And so which only goes to show that the regional architecture that we have right now is no longer, or it's not just a hub and spoke system where you have the US at the center, where the spokes amongst themselves are also connecting with each other because they have interdependent security interests. Yeah, so we see that happening right now.
Well, with the great divide between the U.S. and China, the Philippines, do you feel, is still working to focus on U.S. allies? Say, we talked about Japan with the new agreement. Japan is said to be the U.S.'s staunchest ally. Do you feel that the Philippines is focusing more with Western or Western-linked democracies?
Yes, because they're the ones who have been very vocal about supporting the Philippines. But amongst Asia, you have countries like India and Japan. So the reason why the Philippines has been preoccupied or has been focused with its security relations with the US is because the Philippines has an MDT with the US, which dates back to 1951. But with some shifts around the region that we have seen in recent months and years, the Philippines recognizes that Japan, by geography and by same security interests, can be very instrumental in also safeguarding and in shaping the Philippines' geopolitical security landscape.
Many analysts also say in Taiwan that Japan is Taiwan's most important partner, where some analysts say it's even more important than the U.S. given its proximity. Professor Liu, I wanted to ask, as a military expert, how do you see this cooperation between Japan and the Philippines? Will it be a game changer in the region?
I believe the cooperation is good for the Philippines. Basically, the U.S. Japan, Australia currently putting a lot of efforts, not just supporting their military modernization, but also giving some of aid to pump up the Philippines' capabilities. I just hope that this will not come as escalating such a military competition between the Philippines and China, and also building this airlines singly targeting against China. Because even if the U.S. perspective, looking into bringing all the friends and allies in the region, building this anti-China alliance, but everyone knows if this becomes much stronger, and this attention will not be cannot be inevitable happening in front of us. So basically, my observation and interpretation with regard to Japan's and the Philippine relations is helping the Philippines, but hopefully it will not come as the way that to gradually target against China. Obviously, under the table, everyone knows the basic point is helping the Philippines sufficient capabilities on the military side as well as on the Coast Guard side in the South China Sea. Then the Philippines would have a sufficient capability to deter or defend their interests in the South China Sea.
Which is against China.
Yes, yes.
Speaking of China, how is China currently responding?
Chinese response obviously is very clear. All kind of alliance or cooperation surrounding the neighborhood, they just hope that this will not aim or target against Beijing. And this is their position because they obviously do not have the right to stop this cooperation between and among countries surrounding China. But obviously the relations is not that good at this moment. And even if the US is encouraging all the country to work together to form this counter-China alliance, but every one of us living in the region hope that there should be certain limit because nobody would like to see conflict really happening. So we are just hoping strengthening this position, but not really leading to this direct conflict with China.
To deter, but not to cause actual armed conflict.
Exactly.
Professor Rabena, speaking of the region, the Philippines is a member of ASEAN. How is ASEAN looking at this? Is it taking cue that more U.S. allies are coming to support them against China, or do you feel that they're still more pivoting towards Beijing in many ways?
Okay, so the thing with ASEAN right now is not everyone, I think, has been supportive of the emergence of various unilaterals, like the AUKUS, Japan's Philippine-US security arrangement, and the second Quad, or what's called the Squad, between the Philippines, Japan, US, and Australia. So the Philippines is very supportive of these arrangements because Manila recognizes the limitations of ASEAN. It feels that it's not getting enough support from ASEAN. And so you see from other ASEAN countries, it's much easier for them to say that this is merely between the US and China because they do not have disputes with China. Countries like Thailand, Singapore, Cambodia, Laos, they do not have issues with China, and they are not allies of the United States.
So the Philippines should pivot to other countries such as Japan or other U.S. allies such as South Korea or even the Philippines' closest neighbor, Taiwan.
Yeah, so these are all our major security partners, important partners of the Philippines. So you see in ASEAN, there are nuances. You see, going back during the Cold War, the reason why it was easy to maintain ASEAN neutrality was because the South China Sea issue during the Cold War was not yet an issue. But right now, in this so-called Second Cold War, the South China Sea is already an issue. So that's the difference between the Cold War I and the tensions, great power tensions that we're experiencing right now.
Professor Liu, I wanted to go back to your point that you talked about strengthening military capabilities while at the same time not giving the wrong message to China that will lead to armed conflict. What is the path forward, including with Taiwan, in your opinion?
From my observation, looking into the region, even if from time to time we see military operation by China surrounding Taiwan's air defense identification zone, and also in the South China Sea, closer to the Philippines, but there is a strong political signal behind all this Coast Guard and naval operation. So as long as a political level can communicate, can engage with each other, basically these, as I can see, just a way to show their strengths to each other. It is not really productive to regional peace. So I would take into the most critical part, that is political dialogue, political engagement.
As long as there's an open line of communication.
Right. So for Taiwan and China, of course, we have a high concern with whether China will launch any attack in the future. But basically, everyone knows in Taiwan, as long as we can engage, we can definitely immediately de-escalate the tension there. Whether there will be a common term, political term for the future, is subject to final negotiation between the two sides. So that is a long way off. But basically, we need to find a way to de-escalate what we are confronting with. So I'm sure many of our friends lately asked by foreign friends whether Taiwan remains one of the most dangerous place on earth. But this is exactly showing that there is an urgent need. We need to engage. Otherwise, with this military preparation, it is not really directly helping. But of course, having said that, we need to definitely strengthen our defense capability before we can move into this stage of discussion.
Speaking of engagement, Professor Rabena, we've also seen China send the Monster, China Coast Guard's largest ship into Philippine waters. How does the Philippine establishment see this, and how does the Filipino public see this?
Two things. Firstly, I think China was demonstrating that it's a form of a pressure tactic by them to show that they have superior maritime assets, and therefore, that being the case, has stronger and more powerful water cannons. And number two, I think many in the Philippines, the public, they've gotten used to the presence of many Chinese vessels in the South China Sea.
So that's a bit like with people in Taiwan, how there's a lot of incursions on a daily basis. And do you see similarities with the Philippine public?
Yes, so the public, I think, has become accustomed to having all these Chinese presence, at sea. But what I do know, because that monster ship traversed through the Sabina Shoal, and our Philippine Coast Guard also deployed their own ship, the largest ship, over there to monitor if any reclamation will take place. But fortunately, no reclamation happened, and so I think the ship, the monster ship, just passed by, and no standoff happened between the Chinese and Philippine Coast Guards.
I wanted to also talk a bit about the EU. The EU said, quote, all parties must respect and honor the award, which was legally binding. Professor Liu, how do you see this? Is this similar to statements coming out of the EU on Taiwan?
Every year, July 12th is the anniversary of South China Sea arbitration final award, the date. We can see there are some countries always taking this particular day as a critical day for international law and also international policy. But Taiwan is one of the immediate country impacted by the final award of an arbitration case. But unfortunately, the government here has not done much to recognize such a difficulty, because our policy so far reflected that we don't accept, we don't recognize the arbitration case, final award, because we are not immediate parties concerned in this arbitration case. But obviously, European Union, the United States, especially the European Union, for the first time publicly endorse this law.
Given that this is the first time the EU came out with such a statement, Professor Rabena, do you see this as the success of the Philippine transparent policy?
Well, I would say yes. That's one of the gains of that policy. There has been a lot of statements of solidarity coming from different European countries. So that is one important variable. So we've gotten a lot of diplomatic, political, and military support from them. But however, another variable that has not changed is China's behavior in the South China Sea. So right now in the Philippine public, there is this clamor to these countries, to the European countries, Western countries, even the US, that what else can you provide apart from statements? Okay, so the public essentially wants more, stronger responses.
So what substance? What is substance that would satisfy the Filipino public?
Yeah, so there are different proposals that have come to the fore. One would be that will they be willing to escort Philippine vessels, things like that. So will they show the flag with us? And that remains to be seen. As I said, we have already received some support from them, but it's just a matter of how much support will they be able to give to us.
Thank you very much both for your insights today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching our show today. Stay safe and see you next time.